Welcome to the EPAP Producers Forum here at the Bow Valley Square on the 6th of October 2016.
Yes, I'm Clay Long. I'm a partner at Corvell Consulting. I'm a senior management consultant and project manager, my major roles in Corvell. I've used, prior to 10, 12 years ago when I joined Corvell with Yogi, I was the head of IT at NMAX and ran the IT department. So I have a lot of background in electric utility, but that isn't relevant to this particular session. So my own EPAP experience has been around the last 5 or 6 years and learning measurement and reporting. In that space, we've done everything from process and control development, coaching in EPAP, helping people set up their EPAP programs, measurement schematics, fuel flare event logs, dealing with all that and how you deal with the estimation, and doing field audits related to EPAP. So quite extensively background in this area. So I hope today's session will go well for you.
Thank you, Clay. I'm Yogi Schulz. It's been my pleasure to meet many of you in various settings in the past. I'm a partner in Corvell Consulting as well. We offer information technology consulting, as Clay has just explained to you. We're also heavily involved in the EPAP implementation and operation, both in Alberta, where we started all this, and in Saskatchewan, where EPAP is now in effect as well. You may be aware that I led the project team that developed EPAP for AER, and we implemented that in 2010. And in 2013, I led a project to develop something called PSAP, which is the use of the EPAP principles, but applying them to pipelines. Subsequently, in recent years, Clay and I worked together with the Ministry of the Economy in Saskatchewan to implement Directive 17, or measurement, and then we led the development of EPAP for the government of Saskatchewan, and that was came into effect in April 2016, and I'm sure you're aware of that.
Okay, I had to update this recently to say 35 years of information technology, engineering and finance experience, so I describe myself to clients as a three-headed monster. But I've been working with Yogi and Clay for the last over 5 years on implementing EPAP for some of our operators. In the past, I've done everything from working in offshore exploration in the Arctic to being a field engineer to leading large groups of IT professionals. I was involved in rolling out the SOX program at Encana, and that's how I got into the area that's very closely related to EPAP, very similar program. And so I can take on problems in all those different areas. Okay? Who's next?
I guess I'm the last one on the list here. I'm Mel Miners. Where were we to? As you can guess, I've been around the oil patch for a long time, so you can read this part of it here. I'm a reservoir engineer by trade. Worked for Amoco for 17 years. Is that better? Okay. Worked for Amoco for about 17 years. Finally decided that maybe I should go working for myself, so I set up Martlet Inc., which is my own consulting outfit, mostly reservoir simulation, certain amount of field work, and then about a little over 5 years ago, Yogi and Clay invited me to become associated with Corvell to help out with the EPAP program, specifically to interact with the field staff and the PA staff, because measurements were really part of my overall concern, both with find out why I could never get a good simulation, and essentially dealing with a lot of bad data, either created by field staff who were trying to get around their job easier, or created by PAs that weren't really sure what kind of data was coming in. So that's where my connection came in from. So. Okay, next, back to Clay, I guess.
Mark, what are you doing?
Okay, a little bit about Corvell. Corvell, obviously, there's four of us. We're a boutique company, and obviously you heard a little bit about it already. We have really two lines of business. We do IT project management and managing projects and implementation, such as production accounting systems, field data capture systems. So we have some familiarity with those systems, which helped us in our EPAP world. And the other side is we did get back into the EPAP, and so we do EPAP audits, coaching, and training as well. So, Mr. Mark. Anyway, we're going to go through the agenda here a little quickly. We're going to talk about introduction. We already did that. We're going to talk about the updates to Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. That'll be me. Directive 17 update will be Yogi. He's going to give you an update as to where Directive 17's at, because they are looking at rewriting Directive 17 in Alberta and possibly aligning it very closely with Alberta or Saskatchewan and BC. There's also Petrinex update. There's a bunch of changes going on at Petrinex. Yogi will give us a bit of an update on what's going on there, because Ross is over at the Kappa luncheon doing that over there, so he couldn't come. Anyway, so we'll work on that. So improving, also the AER has implemented a climate change plan and a team that is going to implement the NDP's climate change in AER. And that may, and Mark will give you some ideas as to what that will involve and how it may impact you. Then improving fuel flow and vent recording and reporting for cost efficiencies. Mel's going to talk a little bit about that on one of our projects that we did with one of our clients, and hopefully you'll be able to get some ideas from that and use those ideas and adapt them back in your programs. Then we'll have a general discussion amongst the producers, and the idea of this forum is to actually share ideas amongst each of us, and so that means you guys have to participate as well. But that's why we'll have this little chart, and we'll try to keep some of those topics as we go along, if there's something specific areas of EPAP that we want to talk about. Okay, and then closing comments. So a little bit about an update for BC, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. British Columbia is currently in the process of just kicking off their Petrinex implementation, where they're actually moving to Petrinex. They had their kickoff implementation in September. They're just waiting for ministerial announcement and ministerial approval finally, after 10 years of trying to get there and about 3 attempts. It looks like they're finally going to move forward with that. But from an EPAP perspective, they're not looking at implementing EPAP until they get fully on Petrinex, when Petrinex reporting on a PA side first. So there's not really a lot to say there, although they are involved a lot in the D17 discussions at the moment. Alberta operating routinely. The AER production audit team is continuing to have priorities. We asked what their priorities were, and they declined to give those to us because they would like to hear you guys to hear it directly from them, and we respect that. That's fine. So, but some of the things we do know about AER right now is that they are going through and looking at where you have a particular EPAP theme in 2 years in a row is as listed as deficient. They are going back to you and asking you if you have a last year's plan and this year's plan, and what progress is made against both of those plans. So you better have a remediation plan in place if you have a deficiency, because they'll probably ask. Another thing that AER is starting to do is they're also comparing your CAI reports to your declarations. And they are looking at saying, okay, if you have a bunch of flaring issues on your CAI report and you said that fuel flare vent is all good, then they're going to kind of question that and may come back and ask you what's going on here. So they are starting to focus a little bit on the CAIs. They continue to try to evolve those. They are looking at this, particularly all the false positives, particularly around fuel, and so that's still coming. It's a work in progress on that one. I'm sure you guys have 1,001 false positives on fuel. Saskatchewan has recently implemented their program in April 1st. This year is a trial declaration year. Next year is the year where you have to make your first declaration if you're operating in Saskatchewan. They have sent out all the months, your declaration months. if you were operating in Alberta already, they tried to make it the same month if you so choose. And so they will be, obviously you'll have your months if you are operating in Saskatchewan, and it should be the same as your declaration month in Alberta, unless you've asked to have it changed. Saskatchewan, the Ministry of Economy does not have a production audit team, so they have outsourced that. Deloitte was the winner of that outsource, and they are just in the process of negotiating the final agreement with them. And then they will actually have some, as I was told, bums in seats, and then they will basically start developing their administrative procedures on the inside, like what they have to do when they review a declaration, review the CAIs, all of those things that they have to do in the background on their side. So they don't have any of that in place at this point in time. But what they have an advantage is that they all have to do is make a phone call or two over to AER, and AER is quite willing to help share and get econ off the ground. So they are harmonized fairly closely. The directives in both provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta, are very closely aligned, almost identical, with one clause that's different in the Saskatchewan declaration that says you have to have compliance with D17 measurement 25% this year, 25% the next year, 25%, and then be 100% compliant in 4 years. So there is a progressive, and they do want you to prove that if you are going to, if they ask, you don't have to, but if they ask, you have to be able to demonstrate that you are improving with compliance with D17, actually PNG 17 in Saskatchewan, and be able to comply with that. So that's all I got as for an update on each province, unless anybody's got any questions. Anybody heard anything different? No? Okay. Okay, I'm going to give this next one over to Yogi.
I'm going to just focus for just a couple of minutes on what's happened in the Directive 17 space. Directive 17, as you know, is the measurement directive. And as you know, EPAP is about understanding the level of assurance around our compliance with measurement and reporting. So Directive 17 is a big chunk of that. So again, what's happening in the 3 provinces? The first thing that's happening is all provinces are participating in a review of Directive 17 right now that's being led by all 3 provinces to improve clarity. So that's nothing to do with changing requirements. It's just about saying, does the text make sense? And that's a big issue because it's a big document, and various paragraphs, sections, whatever, were written by various people over many years. So there's lots of ambiguity in terminology and phraseology that is worth improving. So that's ongoing right now as we speak. And if you have your favorite paragraph that you don't like, that's in need of revision, by all means, you can send me an email, or you can send Colby Ruff an email, or you can send Allison Dolter in Saskatchewan an email. Certainly willing and interested to look at what people are thinking about. So, but it's going to be probably the better part of a year before you're going to see that in living color on the regulator's websites. So that'll be a while. It's a big document. And there's a lot of opinions in the room, too. That's another issue, right? Achieving some consensus. Okay, so let's drill in just a little bit on a province-specific basis. British Columbia has their own version of Directive 17 with its own mutant nuances, which I'm sure some of you have run into, and they're working to revise that, and you can expect an update here within the year or so. In addition, in Alberta, there's a CAP committee that's putting together various proposals for actual regulatory change for Alberta. So that's going on. So again, if there's something that you think needs changing, then by all means feed that into the process. Now in Saskatchewan, we've gone from almost nothing to the entire directive. So that's a dramatic change. And the government recognized that and provided for the 4-year implementation period. How much Saskatchewan do we have in the room? How many people are interested in that? About half the crowd. Okay, so a little more time. So by this point, where you should be at is you should be saying, well, is our measurement deficient or inadequate against Directive 17? So kind of do an assessment of what's going on across all of your operated properties. And as a result of that, you should be able to get a list of deficiencies by property. And then you need to map those across however many years you want to take, no more than 4, right, to improve that. And then the government wants to see an annual status report on this. So next year, you're going to be asked to file a status report of how you're doing, which presumably is, here's my plan, and here's my first year progress against that plan. Okay, so if you're on that path, great. If you're giving me the look of what are you talking about, we aren't doing any of that, then you've got work to do. Okay. So I don't know, should we elaborate on that a little more, or are you in the loop on all of that? And if you've looked at the Saskatchewan Declaration, it's different from the Alberta Declaration, EPAP Declaration, because of that one point related to your implementation progress. You want to throw a question up on the white flip chart for this, or should we drill into it a little bit more now, or you're all good? One drill? Okay. All right. So, how do you report the status? That's great. Good point. In the declaration, you're asserting that you have a plan, and you're executing that plan, and you're 25% done. Those are the 3 assertions that you're making with respect to measurement improvements when your declaration month comes up in 2017. Okay, so that's part of what you asked, Peter. The other is, how do you report your status? Okay, and it's quite free form. You decide how you want to report the status. Okay. But you're going to be asked. Like, it's not are you doing this? And you say yes, and that's the end of it. No, you will be asked to submit something to the government. Now, the other thing is, well, some people ask, well, what does 25% mean? How do I know I'm 25% done? Right? And there are lots of answers to that question, I think, right? So the answer again is, you decide. The government is giving you a lot of latitude here. But what the government is not saying is, or they're saying that you must not do, and that is, in the last year, ask for an extension. Okay? So if you're in year 4 and you say, gee, I'm only 25% done, you're going to have a busy year, says the government, as opposed to, I can get an extension. So the government's viewpoint is, we've given you lots of notice, lots of opportunity to plan, lots of opportunity to do, so don't phone us in the 4th year and ask for an extension. That came out loud and clear in the government's communication events that we held earlier this year.
So are they expecting in a 4-year time period to be perfect reporting?
Well, no. Okay, so thank you. So Rose asked, are they expecting after 4 years to be perfect on the reporting? No, this is about Directive 17, not about reporting. So what they expect, that you will be compliant after 4 years with measurement. D17. Okay, so then, all right, well, compliance, how perfect is compliance? And even if you are perfect, it's tough to stay that way, right? And I think the government recognizes that. But if you've recognized that you are non-compliant with something, that's okay. But you better have a remediation plan and some evidence that you're working that plan to become compliant. Like, I think there's enough recognition that it's very difficult for everybody to be compliant every day of the year on all properties, right? That's ridiculous. It's almost impossible. But if you're ignoring the whole thing, you don't even notice when you're non-compliant, and therefore you have no remediation plan because you don't know whether you're non-compliant. That's a non-starter as an approach. I'm not sure. Have I covered your question, Rose? Or only part of it? Or?
Yogi, can you give some examples of what some companies are doing? On showing what they're measuring their compliance?
Okay, so there's two obvious ways to measure your percentage compliance or percentage non-compliance. One is to do it by requirement across all properties, and the other is to do it the other way around, is to do it by property and requirements within property. Okay? And you may say, well, how do I actually do all this? The government of Saskatchewan has published this Excel spreadsheet. I don't know if you've downloaded that. Anybody downloaded that? Okay. And they're saying, okay, a couple of you have done that. Great. And they're saying, you know, if you're not sure how to go about this, maybe this spreadsheet will help, as opposed to this spreadsheet is how you will do it and this is a requirement. That's not what's around it. It's here is an idea that might work for you, and if you use it and it works for you, great. If you use it and it doesn't work for you, don't phone us and complain. And if you ignore it and don't use it but you're doing something else, that's okay. So can I put you on the spot and see what you think of this? No.
We just downloaded it and looked at it. We haven't filled it in.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So you've gotten that far. Do you want to jump in, or with your experience, or?
Well, we did the same thing, went through, just filled out the spreadsheet, what's applicable to our costs. It's, I guess the spreadsheet's pretty open.
Yeah.
So not everything
Oh.
will be populated, so then you kind of step back and wonder, well, really, is this how representative is it? But it does give you something, this is the government come to, and you can say, I filled out your spreadsheet.
Okay, but it sounded like it had enough value to cause you to fill it out, as opposed to just throw it in the recycle bin.
When you start enlightening the people in the field, and they're keep questioning, you know, well, what do we have to do? What is it? Well, here's a spreadsheet. Add to it. And I stepped through it for most of our properties. Only had a few things that actually connect.
Okay, so it seemed to be useful and relevant to your field people.
Yeah.
Well, you said that with a grimace that makes me not sure whether you.
Well, I don't think it's going to be one all swap all.
Ah, okay. So it was useful in some ways and not useful.
It's a starting point. And then,
Okay.
for people in the field out there, it gives them good insight where
Okay.
it's going.
Yeah, because if you hand some new person all of Directive 17, they kind of go, "Thanks a lot. That's not helping me," right? They need some help. Okay, so think about downloading and evaluating the spreadsheet. Thank you for your experience. Am I helping you ladies at all? Is there another question you want to throw at this?
So if you already have your controls all set up for EPAP through AER, could you not just use the same controls for EPAP in Saskatchewan?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why Directive 17 in Saskatchewan is identical, fancy word, harmonized, harmonized between the two provinces, and the two EPAP directives are very close. And the Petrinex EPAP process is identical. So very much is what we're saying, Brenda, to our clients, is if it's working for you, whatever you're doing in Alberta, just enlarge that for the rest of for Saskatchewan. And maybe in a few years' time, you'll enlarge that to BC. Am I getting the hook here pretty quick? But this sounds useful and relevant. Okay. Does that help, Brenda? So by all means, the cheapest and fastest way to deal with Saskatchewan is just simply widen what you've been doing in Alberta, because presumably whatever it is you're doing in Alberta is working for you, right?
When will Econ stop publishing CAIs? Or are they?
Okay, so
We should be able to download monthly.
yeah. So okay, good. So Jonathan, the CAI reports are available from January 2016 production going forward. And you can use that as to provide you with some insights into where there might be issues. For Saskatchewan. All right. So those are available now. Anybody downloaded those, found those useful? Yes? Useless? We're going to take a survey, useful, useless? Okay. Anybody else? Going, gone. I'm moving on. Okay, so that was the last one. Petrinex update. Okay. What are we going to say there? Next slide, please. So what's been going on? Are you familiar with all of these initiatives that are going on at Petrinex that are enhancing the functionality of Petrinex? So there's APMC reporting, oil forecasting, EPAP reporting we just talked about. The Petrinex inclusion project is just ramping up. There's the Indian oil and gas, bringing that on to Petrinex. That's likely to start within this year sometime later. And there's discussion with Manitoba. Don't hold your breath. That could take a while. Okay, so that's kind of the highlights of what's going on. Do you receive summaries of this kind of status internally through your reps on Petrinex or through Petrinex itself? This is just a synopsis from what's available on the Petrinex website. Rose?
The forecasting, I've looked at the forecasting, but unfortunately, if you have wells that are in royalty holidays, it's forecasting royalty that you're paying 5% on, and they still don't have a tool to tell you when you're going to reach your royalty cap. Okay, because if it's an oil well, they also take, and you're selling gas also or products, then all of that comes into play for the royalty holiday. So even the royalty letters that come out and you try to figure out, the oil is 1 month behind, but the gas is 2 months behind.
Right.
And then you say, because I'm one of those that always gets a nasty letter and says, or a phone call, usually a phone call because it's a lot of money. Rose, you didn't submit enough royalty.
And you said, yes, I agree, but?
I say, yes, I agree, but can you give me a royalty tool?
And then what do they say?
They say, no, Rose, we don't have that tool. And I said, well, that's funny. You can calculate it, but you can't give it to industry to calculate the same thing.
Okay, great question. So it sounds like you're in the middle of some kind of catch-22 there.
Yep, and I think a lot of people are. If they're drilling new wells, like our company is drilling new wells, so we're always in that royalty holiday.
Okay.
Some of our wells are quite big, so within 3 months, we've reached our cap. But by the time we're doing forecasts, the forecasting tool doesn't help me. I mean, if you're stagnant, you're okay on that.
Stagnant, you mean level?
Stagnant, you're just doing the same thing, decreasing. But
so I don't know if this will help or you've already tried it, but there is an enhancement submission process at Petrinex. And have you submitted anything? They claim to be interested in these kinds of observations that you're making, and then it gets on this list.
Oh, I have talked to the help desk at Petrinex about this.
And have they said, great idea, Rose, submit an enhancement request?
No.
So I don't know why they didn't say that to you, because I'm hearing you, and I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Go ahead, Leslie.
Can you repeat that, Yogi?
Okay, hang on. Let me give the microphone to Leslie.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah.
I was just letting her know that the enhancement request is just a PDF on the Petrinex site. You can download it and get your supervisor or management something and sign it and send it in.
Perfect. So thank you, Leslie, for sharing the details of the enhancement process. Okay, just quickly, this last point on this slide. During the last year, Petrinex has had underway what they call their Bold Moves initiative, which is asking some big questions around how can Petrinex help industry to reduce costs and simplify reporting. So there have been a number of proposals around adding maps, better downloads, better exports, better integration with tools like AccuMap and GeoScout, supporting pipelines and better facility reporting, well asset management, a huge list of really big scope ideas. So if there's anything you want to add to that list, by all means contact Petrinex. They want to see if Petrinex can go well beyond its current role in doing a good job of volumetric reporting. Okay, over to you, Mark.
Okay, I'm just going to briefly give you an update on the AER's climate policy implementation, which we heard about at Industry Measurement Group meeting a little while ago. So there are 4 pillars in their leadership plan: ending coal pollution, carbon levy and rebates, you might have heard some of that recently, capping oil sands emissions, and reducing methane emissions. So their target is 45% by 2025. And this is actually being driven by the federal government as well. It's not an Alberta-only thing. So there's a group at the AER now called the Climate Policy Assurance Team that's ensuring the AER fulfills that role and puts this stuff in place. So they're designing and implementing regulations that will result in a 45% reduction in methane emissions by 2025. And that's based on the 2014 National Inventory Report of Emissions. So the steps they're going through is they're going to look at regulatory enhancements, reporting, platform integration, and implementing regulatory changes. So under regulatory enhancements, they're looking at improving guidance for emission reporting, clarifying emissions, whether they're fuel or flare. So for example, if you're using fuel gas or produced gas right now to run instrumentation or like methanol pumps in the field and just venting that, that gets reported as fuel, but from a greenhouse gas perspective, that's actually a methane emission. So they're looking at the definitions of fuel and vent gas to straighten that out. And they're going to have draft regulations. They're targeting to have draft regulations in 2017. So the reporting platform integration, they're looking at determining what the baseline is right now in Alberta so that they can actually discern what the reductions are. And they're looking at revising and integrating reporting systems to make that easier. And as far as implementing the regulatory changes, as I mentioned, they're looking at having draft regulations in 2017, and they're looking for stakeholder review in that time, and they're looking at focusing on the low-cost, largest sources first. Now, one of the things that they're doing is creating a technical subcommittee around measurement and reporting. And they want to engage that subcommittee, people with technical expertise, to support them. So if that's actually something that piques your interest, you can talk to one of us and we can tell you who to get in touch with if you want to participate in that technical subcommittee. And that's...
Any questions for Mark about this?
I think it's important to mention that if you have an HSC group, they're probably the ones that are in charge of this and that you'll be feeding them information, but it's not. That's where it's starting in our group.
In your company, it's HSC
Yep.
starting that?
Because they're the ones that do all this emission stuff, right? They're the ones that are the front runners for high risks and stuff around that. So we're feeding them information. It's pretty ambiguous right now. We've done a whole project forecasting on it, and some of the consultants out there are using bad data to give you a baseline for your company, and they're comparing you against your peers that are not. It's irrelevant information that they're comparing. They're looking at BOEs, they're not looking at facility sizes where they produce oil, gas, So just to let you know, you better dig into your own stuff very carefully, because like they gave us a terrible baseline number compared to our peers, and we actually put our whole measurement team on it.
Yeah.
And dug into it and questioned our consulting firm, blah, 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 and for us, it was super disappointing that was the data that was being supplied. However, on the other hand, if you want to look at it sort of the humor in it, if our baseline's bad, we can only get better. So-
That's right. If they over-report your emissions, then it's pretty easy to make the target, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
There's always a way to
yeah,
game
so
it.
HSC wasn't as concerned that we
Yeah.
have perhaps some bad data, but from measurement being more of accounting, we were very disappointed.
Okay, thanks.
We do know that the regulatory changes they did talk about, they're going to review all the AER's regulations. And yeah, they're going to review all of AER's regulations. And as they go through and review them, some of them are all going to be revised based on the climate change strategy. For example, D60, which is flaring and venting, is going to have a major overhaul probably by next year. D17 will have some impact, and also Manual 11 and D7 will also probably be impacted on the reporting side. So, and there's a few others that are also involved in that, but those are some of the major ones that they're reviewing at this point in time from an AER perspective, and looking at revising to implement some of the policies related to the green climate change policy of the NDP government. Manual 11, which is the production accounting manual for online submissions to Petrinex. Directive 7, which is also the reporting for PAs. Directive 17, obviously, is measurement, is also going to be impacted. And Directive 60, which is flaring and venting. D46, which I think is 46, which is MARPs, if you have thermal facilities that you're also using, that will be reviewed and impacted as well. And I can't remember off the top of my head what other directives will also be looked at. Any other questions? Mark, you done? Yep. Okay, we're going to let Mel have the floor here.
Okay, what I'd like to address is our approach to looking at fuel flare and vented volumes. Basically, our idea is to try and keep things as simple as possible and minimize any problems with the field staff and PA time. So first off, what we need to do is define what are the routine and non-routine events, as they will determine what sort of approach we need to take, and then also determine if these volumes are actually measured and captured in your field data capture systems, or if they're the non-measured volumes. And it's really the non-routine events and the non-measured volumes that create the most problems. They're either ignored at the field level, or they create a lot of effort to try and get those volumes. So what we've tried to do is come up with a few ideas on how to minimize the effort taken in getting those volumes. So in general, most of our routine volumes are actually measured, so we can pretty much dismiss those unless we are misreporting them under the various categories of fuel, flare, and vent, in which case I've got a couple of ideas here for that. The other thing is that if we are ignoring them, we really should be reporting in one way, shape, or form, because that will be coming up under the greenhouse gas problem here. Okay, so number one, let's do with the three categories: fuel, then flare, and then vent. Fuel under Directive 17 is defined as any volume of gas that's consumed doing a useful purpose. Okay, so a lot of places where we are misreporting is fuel that is actually being used for pilot gas in a flare. Okay, Alberta only. Sorry. Yes, I'm speaking from the perspective of Directive 17 within Alberta, as opposed to Saskatchewan or BC as it comes along. So Directive 17 in Alberta defines fuel as being used as a useful purpose. A lot of cases what we're doing is we're using fuel going up a flare stack to keep a pilot in place in case of emergency. We're using it as blanket gas, we're using it as purge gas, and also to supplement the BTU value to bring substandard gas up so that can be combusted when it is going up the flare stack. In each of those cases, that is actually considered to be fuel. It is not flared gas. So be careful when you are reporting those volumes that you actually report them as fuel and not as flared gas. So they're because they have done a useful purpose. Okay. What else is there? The other place where we do miss a lot of our gas volumes is in very small pieces of equipment, usually out at a well site somewhere where we have little chemical pumps, methanol pumps, soap injection pumps, and also during the wintertime, catadine heaters. Most of this gas that's being consumed in those uses is not measured. We simply take some of the gas off as a slipstream from our production and use it in the pumps and use it in the catadines. Now, what we need to do is capture that. It is actually being used as fuel. So, however, to try and figure out exactly how much is being used could be an onerous exercise. However, a lot of our chemical pumps are pretty much set at the same rate throughout the whole year, especially say for methanol pumps and chemical pumps. So what we can do is talk to your friendly field people or your friendly production engineer, get them to tell you what kind of pumps are in place, how much fuel they use on a per stroke basis, how many strokes are they doing every day or every hour or every minute, whatever. And a quick calculation can be inserted into your PA spreadsheet to be able to capture those volumes. The other one, the catadine heaters, typically in the province of Alberta, our heating season starts on October the 1st and pretty much goes through until the end of April. So what you could do there is simply go into your spreadsheet. Your production people know what catadines are in place, the size of those heaters, and how much fuel they consume on an hourly basis or whatever else it happens to be. And then you can put that into your spreadsheet, a quick if statement in there. Are we in winter season or are we in summer season? So you can capture more or less the volumes that are being consumed by those heaters. Now, is it going to be 100% exact? No, not really, because sometimes they may be on, they may be off, they may be turned on earlier or later. But on average, throughout your company, you should be able to capture those volumes with reasonable certainty. Okay. The flare. Flared gas is any gas that is consumed that does not have any useful purpose, generally either in an emergency or in order to be able to get rid of small amounts of sour gas that are, would, when burned, still fall below the SO2 emissions standards. So in the case where we have small volumes of sour gas, typically those are coming from our stock tanks and routed back through the flare stack. We can if you don't have a good estimate right now, there are various calculations for calculating the stock tank vapors that would be coming from your production, and on average you should be able to calculate approximately how much gas is going up that flare stack that would be burned during that emission. The other time when we do have a flare is when we have some sort of a plant emergency, in which case either some vessels or all of the plant are sent to the flare stack, and we have really no idea exactly how much gas is consumed during that time unless you actually have a meter in place. So what I've taken a look at is there are a number of companies around that have some very elegant computer programs. They want the vessel sizes, the types of internals, the number of pipes that are coming out of it, pipes that are connecting the various vessels, bends, and everything else in there. And they use all of the various compositions for the gas that appear in the different vessels. They go through, use equation of state, and come up with some very precise calculations on the amount of gas that could have been released. The reality, in our opinion, is that when an emergency happens, valves are going to be open, some are closed, the vessels are going to be in different operating conditions. We may have a vessel that's separator that's dumping, it may be filling up. We don't exactly know what the total exact conditions are in the facility at the time. So our idea is that if you come up with some sort of an average volume that most of your vessels and most of your piping are accounted for, and an average, if we take some average conditions of the plant at any given time, you should be able to come up with a reasonable estimate of what the volume that is flared during that particular event. And again, on average, you may be high one time, you may be slightly low another time, but on average, you should be able to capture those volumes quite nicely. Okay, then finally, what is vent? Vent is any gas that is released to the atmosphere without doing any sort of useful purpose. Typically, the two types of vents that occur are pig trap openings and also line blowdowns. Those are probably the two main ones that we come across. Pig traps, our field staff simply go over there, they shut in some valves, open up the pig trap, either retrieve a pig or stick a pig in there. They may gland, if it does have a pressure transducer on it of some sort, gauge that you do know what the pressure is in there. Most of the times they just simply check it quickly to see if it is pressured up or not, and then go ahead, depressure it, and away we go. So again, our approach from here is to get a general idea of the volume of the pig trap, what are the average operating conditions of that particular part of the gathering system, and simply use that as your calculation any time that a pig trap is opened or during a routine retrieval or launching of a pig. And these can be captured easily in a spreadsheet. Our operators can go out there whenever they do launch a pig or retrieve a pig, they just simply make an entry on your spreadsheet, and that entry is captured, and away you go. Line blowdowns, pretty much we know the operating condition of the gathering system at that time, or that line at the time. We can get a general idea of the overall volume in that line, and again a quick calculation to determine how much gas was released during that time, entered into your spreadsheet again. So realistically, we're looking at more of a spreadsheet type of approach to try and gather all of these events and the volumes that are emitted during those particular events. So we believe that our recommended approach, although being fairly simplistic, is probably the lowest cost solution for any gathering or non-routine fuel for event volumes, mainly because we use simple tools to approximate the volumes due to the overall uncertainty of the actual volume and the actual conditions under which those volumes were emitted. It does ensure that all of the events are captured. We've found from experience that our field operators are very diligent in entering the various releases at the various points along their system. And then finally, because it is fairly simplistic and easy to use, it should minimize their field staff time and also your PA efforts involved. So, okay. That's all I have to say about that part of it. Questions, concerns? Nope.
I have a question. You guys are talking about equipment and fuel used at the equipment. I had one EPAP audit done, and what they did was they actually listed all the equipment and the approximate fuel use of the equipment, but I'm not sure why that isn't shared with industry. Or with PAs.
And this was within your company, or
yes,
or the regulator gave you?
No, not the regulator. It wasn't Corvell. It was a different company that we had hired, and then they gave us a list of all the equipment, possible equipment.
Yes.
And then they had hourly rates, consumption rates. So if it was on, and then so you could draft a worksheet based on the facilities you had at your particular.
Okay, the way I can address that is that most of your production engineers should have that data available to them, or either they or the field staff will have that data. So it's a matter of listing up, and I think I know what you're referring to. I believe in that particular event, your company had hired somebody to go out and document all of the pieces of equipment at your various facilities.
No, this encompassed equipment that...
just specifically, okay.
Specifically, these were the ranges. So why isn't that, if we're so in tune with fuel, why couldn't one of those be drafted on Petrinex?
You're trying to get it on Petrinex.
Well, why not?
Okay.
So it helps the PAs that if they go and they go, oh, well, I'm reporting this fuel. Well,
yep.
If I know that I have yes. What is the rate? What should I expect for fuel, or what should I be?
Okay, I guess from my perspective, I'm saying you should be able to get that from your production engineer, and they would have the specific equipment at that particular location.
No, I realize that. If we look at a schematic, we can do the same thing.
Not necessarily all of the fuel usage points are going to be on your measurement schematic.
Right.
Depending on the diligence of the person that was developing them.
Yes.
So a lot of the manufacturers manufacturers.
Yeah, the manufacturer's specs is really what you do. And what you're asking for, what I believe, Rose, is that there's a list of all of the manufacturer's specs with all of their assumed usages for all the different pieces of equipment. Well, every company seems to have built those on their own, and there's nobody out there in the public domain that would say, here's a list and here's all that. Every company, every manufacturer would do that, but most companies are left to their own devices to pull that list together. Or you hire a consultant that has that list already built.
Here's a little example here of a chemical injection pump and the information available to it, and then it comes back to later on is
Okay.
what is the normal usage for that particular use.
So,
That data is available, it's just a matter of who you wait.
so Rose, so
Trying to get Petrinex to do it is another.
you guys can take that offline and we can move along. Anyway, EPAP discussions. We're really running out of time here. We're kind of crunched up the thing. Does anybody have any topics about EPAP that we haven't covered today that they would like to talk about with the rest of the group or hear some discussion on? Is everybody's got an EPAP program for Alberta? I'm assuming the people like from Saskatchewan or using Saskatchewan would have liked the very detailed description of what Mel talked about with fuel, fire, and vent. So that should be helpful to the people in Saskatchewan or operating in Saskatchewan. Any other things? Is everybody's EPAP program going fine these days? Obviously it must be. There's no questions. Everybody's is perfect. Their CAI reports are perfect. Declarations coming up with evaluations coming up. Anyway. Yes, Renee.
So the question I always get management is, how are we doing compared to other companies, or how much is enough for internal? How many samples or how many evaluations do you need to do? Random samples?
So the question. Yeah, so the question you're getting from management is, okay, how are we doing compared to our peers, and then how much is enough? That's a real loaded question. When we talk to either Econ or AER, they won't give you an answer on a specific amount. And what we're seeing, though, is a general trend with some of our clients. We're seeing a trend moving down, obviously, with cost-cutting measures as much as possible. And what is a reasonable level is totally up to your management team. We have one company that we're working with that says they don't think it's enough, and they're taking this to management and say, okay, are you prepared to sign this declaration based on a sample size of only 5%, for example, and saying this is how we operate across the company. Well, you're signing the declaration and giving it to the regulator. Is that enough? Well, it's usually typically a lot up to management and how much they want to go. If you want to get down to 1% or 2% for the larger companies, they may go with that. But again, you have to defend it in front of the regulator. If the regulator says, can you validly be knowing that you know the state of compliance with measurement in your company and you have enough processes and controls in place to say, yes, I know with the state of measurement. Absolutely.
Great question, Renee. And really what management is asking, I think, even though they're not admitting it, can I do less because my peers may be doing less? Am I overdoing it? Right? They're always looking for that cost angle. So it's back to what is their comfort level of what they're willing to sign. The rules on sampling are very clear as what the minimum sample is, but maybe you can legitimately talk yourself into a lower number because it equals a lower cost. And here are some of the criteria that I think you might want to lay out there for whether you can talk yourself into a lower number. The first one is, can I demonstrate that I'm on track with the remediation that I agreed to last year? Okay, so that if you're on track with your remediation, then maybe that says we can back it off. The other one is the one that I think Clay mentioned earlier, where AER is asking, can you demonstrate you're making improvements even though you declared the same reporting theme deficient 2 years in a row? Okay. The other one is, how are you trending on your CAI report? Are you trending up, horizontal, or down? If you're trending down, then maybe you can talk yourself into a smaller sample size. Another question is, if you've had an AER field inspection, what did it reveal? And have you addressed that, or does that suggest you may have more systemic problems elsewhere in the organization that need more attention? Okay. So if you have all of these events occurring in your environment and you're getting gold stars on all of them, by all means, reduce the sample size. But if you can't demonstrate you're getting gold stars on all of them, I think you're on thin ice to reduce the sample size. Now, that brings it, do you want to talk about the zero declaration? Okay. So the most extreme example of this is to simply put zeros in for the number of facilities evaluated, push the print button, and get your boss to sign it. Okay, I'm getting a really, are you crazy? Are you kidding me? Look at that idea, right? Now, I'm not suggesting this is best practices, right? But that is an extreme example if management is saying this, I don't see any value in this.
Well, they're definitely not saying I don't see any value. How much do we actually have to do year after year after year? So we've reduced it from year to year to year.
Well, if you've reduced it year to year to year, and you can defend that because you've been doing remediation and you're getting fewer not effective controls, I'm all good with that. But if your number of not effective controls is level or going up and your sample size is going down, I think that becomes increasingly difficult to defend. So,
They see value. They definitely see value. In my shop, anyway.
okay, anybody else want to wade into that one?
Any other questions?
Are you getting the same reaction that Renee is? It's certainly coming up at our clients. Or are you getting, well, Brent, or how are you getting the reverse? Brenda, could you use a little more money and maybe improve our measurement? Is anybody encountering that? I'm sorry?
That's where you get into that remediation. You can't afford to do some of the remediation. I have some of that, and I'm trying to come up with exceptions to it for various things.
Okay, but if you don't want to do the remediation, then you're either accepting the non-compliance or you're saying you're going to apply for an exemption, right?
I'm not a production accountant myself, but I know there are lots more. The CAI reports that come out, I've been told by our PAs that it's not really a good indication of how we're doing, because even though you've looked into certain things and may have issues with it that you can't rectify, you can never get that taken off of the report. Is that true?
Well, okay, there's a multi-part answer to that. I'll get to, you can't, it doesn't come off the report, that's true, but you can filter it out next month and ignore it and just focus on everything else. If you've believed you've addressed or can defend some item, please filter it out so that people are not re-spinning their wheels on dealing with something you've dealt with last month.
But does the AER know that how do we?
They don't. And if they ask you, you can tell them.
Yes, you can. You can do workflow in place. You can do workflow.
Hang on.
Some, if you close them, then the AER can see your explanation. If you leave them open, then they can't see them. We can pick and choose what we want them to see or not see. But our production accountants can also see the explanations in Petrinex, and they know that that's answered.
Okay, so good point. I tend to be, I forget about the workflow. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so in AER, you can do an industry-initiated workflow for all of your CAIs, and you can do that, and that's what you're talking about. Yeah, you can put them in, and then basically you're given a timeline as to when they're up for review. I believe the timeline is 2 years, and you say, as she said, if you leave them open, AER can't see it, but if you close them, then AER does see them, and they know that you're actually addressing some of the CAIs. As far as the CAI not being report not being a good, it's just one indicator, not all. But it is relatively, if you can filter out and just talk about the number of line items on it, and what Yogi's talking about is whether the number of line items is going down or going up or staying the same. And so it's just one indicator. I mean, obviously, every year you're doing evaluation controls. Best indicator is, how many themes are deficient or acceptable? Would be a much stronger one. But CAIs throughout the year can help you know whether you're getting on the right track or not.
I would like to just deal with the next slide, and then we'll take the next question. Can you just advance to the next slide? So we wanted to just do a little poll. We've offered a number of seminars about EPAP and related issues in the past, and we're not sure what would be of interest to you in the future. Okay, I don't know which of these you attended and which ones are interesting to you or what you might like to do for the future. Earlier in the year, we offered the EPAP best practices that was quite reasonably attended. You may have seen the announcements on the CAPA newsletter. Last year, we gave a one-day seminar as part of last year's CAPA Education Days on this, how to deal with the CAI report, and we're dealing with all these issues you're just bringing up now and a bunch of other ones. We've also done one called the EPAP High-Speed Evaluation of Controls, which is a half-day seminar, and we've also given an EPAP Management Overview half-day seminar. And we're not sure if anybody would come to one of these if we offered it again, or whether you would suggest to your peers or yourself that you'd come to one. So we just wanted to get a sense of, or maybe there's one missing. There's one you're interested in that we haven't covered. Would anybody see value, or are you on coming to an EPAP best practices seminar, or are you feeling up to speed on that and you would say, yeah, that's passé, I know all that? Anybody would think about coming to one if we offered it again this year or next year? 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6? Okay, thank you. Investigating, like dealing with the CAI report, how to really look at the thing and what to do about it and how to resolve the issues and this workflow thing we've been discussing. Would anybody come to one of those? Okay, a lot more interest in that, over half. The high-speed evaluation of controls says, how do I get this evaluation of controls done in under a day? And can I still demonstrate it as credible work? You're interested in that one? Okay. All right. Okay. And the management overview is either something we present to a management team or it's a workshop we hold and you walk out with a PowerPoint that you can use in orienting your management. Not, EPAP's been around long enough that maybe this is no longer relevant, or you've had changes in management that does make it relevant. Anybody interested in that? 5 or 6. Okay, so there's still interest and demand for these items. Okay, perfect. Thank you. We appreciate your suggestions. Okay, so now let's go back a slide. So I guess, oh no, that's a good slide. I suspect there are people who need to go, right? So why don't you take it?
Yeah, for those that we'd like to thank you all for coming out. Those that want to stay behind and have a few more questions or questions they would like to discuss amongst yourselves or with us, we are happy to do that. We do realize you're under time constraints and some of us have to get back to work given the way it is. So we appreciate you all for coming out today and we wish you all the best. Yeah, please take pizza. There's lots left. And so we're going to keep going here just for the last people that want to remain behind.